Wir setzen gleich fort mit Matteo Inches. Matteo studied architecture at the, you can come here. Studied architecture at the Accademia dell'Architettura in Mendrisio, where he received his master's degree in 2014. He worked for 2 years with Buzzi and Buzzi in Locarno. And meanwhile, he opened his own studio in 2010, in which later in 2014 also Nastasia Inches Geleta entered. And since 2017, the office is renamed Inches Geleta Architetti, based in Locarno. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Let's talk about the context where we come from, which is Locarno, a place very much closer to the northern part of Italy rather than the German part. So culturally, we find ourselves rooted a bit more on the southern area. But apart from that, like all areas of Europe, we are confronted with historical context and with the urban fabric of the context in which we operate. So we find ourselves always struggling between confronting ourselves between the role of the architecture and nature as the main feature and canvas of our intervention. We do believe, though, that architecture should have inside a very strong feature that can give timelessness to its vision and its purpose. And we strive to find this kind of approach in our buildings, as we did, for example, in the museum in Minusio, where we built a pavilion in an historical context, and the aim was to blend with this urban fabric, but at the same time try to renewal the community feelings of belonging to a place. So architecture should also, in our opinion, create the place. And when you do intervene in a context such as we did for the Weidmann House Valle Maggia, we took reference from vernacular elements of the landscape and we translated into architecture. So how about going back to the idea of living under a shelter which is created with this massive roof of concrete? So taking inspiration from the Splui, which were these vernacular elements created by Farm, which founded shelter underneath a rock, we thought that this contemporary house could have the same, let's call it Stimmung. So the house, it's covered by this massive concrete element, which also give a division between, so the tectonic of the building gives a division between the living area and the sleeping area, divided in two, and the interior and the exterior spaces. So we took reference from the vernacular and translated into contemporary while working in a valley. But what about when we work in a context that is completely different, such the city? We believe that it's important to take reference to what came before us. So contemporary architecture of the masters as a reference of typology. In this case, Vacchini for us was a reference when we developed the Infinity Residence, which resembled a lot a project we completed. And the architecture really took inspiration from what was previously constructed by those who, for us, were masters and who put the accent on structure as main feature for the expression of a building. So we believe that for this urban element, new urban element, we had to look back. And therefore, the Palazzo Pioda, it's basically an envelope that is framed by its structure. So you only have two elements, which are the perimeter structure and the inner cantilever wall that create an overall look of a building that is elevated from the ground, and the 6 apartments, one on top of each other, are framed within the structural element. This was a private project, our very first urban intervention, before we only did a renovation. And going from private to public, I briefly show you a competition that we won with my wife in 2017, which was a school extension. So the existing school of the 70s was elevated of 1 floor, and our goal was to try to blend in with the existing with a very light structure that also connected the massive concrete basement to the sky. So you have this light rooftop, let's say, which contain a canteen where kids eat and other complementary spaces. So the rooftop follows the original structural grid, but at the same time, it doesn't touch the slab of the existing school, but it actually is elevated from the roof and attach itself to the edges of the construction, the existing construction. So, like in the Palazzo Pioda, it's the structure that plays the role of a primer actor. You have the perimeter and only 4 pillars in the middle and a central core that divide the spaces. So the structure, once again, for us plays the role as a main actor from the outside, but also from the inside. So the project, we call it Fil Rouge. And we believe that the Fil Rouge, in this sense, it's not only a way to express, like in this project, the construction and the expression of the building, but it's also a way to connect our work to those of the master of the past that for us are a reference and also a guideline for future projects. Thank you.